Welcome to everyone's favorite podcast, It's Reclaimed Audio, with your hosts, Phil Pinsky, Bill Lutz, and Tim Sway.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Reclaimed Audio. This is episode 282 for April 7th, 2021. My name is Phil Pinsky. With me, as always, Bill Lutz and, of course, Tim Sway. This week's top Patreon supporters are Lakeside Woodcrafter, Klingspor Woodworking Shop, Stu Morrison, The Godfather, Jimmy DeResta.
I was just thinking
happy birthday?
Right off the cuff, and I don't know how to play Happy Birthday on the trumpet, but yeah, his birthday was just the other day, so.
Yeah.
Happy
Third.
birthday, Jimmy.
Yeah. Anyways. Scott Turner, Greg Mead, Chad Grossclaws, Shane Bronson, Jeff Shaw, Infinite Craftsman, LiquidRC.com, Jim Bashir, Paul Jackman, the boys over at Maybe I've Said Too Much. Do they still do stuff? Creator Nader, Wesley Treat, Rob Ray, Darren Mattis, ISO Tunes, Tim Holliner, and Gangi and Pop Makerspace.
You know what the boys over at Maybe I Said Too Much still do? They still support this podcast. That's what they still do. So that's enough.
Fair enough.
That's enough.
Bill, do me a favor. Take that bell, throw it against the wall, please.
Dude, I just said right before we started, I said, don't forget, Phil, and I held it up, because we agreed that I would give ISO Tunes the bell.
Yeah. I don't know if we need to do that. Let's talk, boys. What are we working on? Let's go to Bill Lutz. Give me something real. Give me something you put together with your hands this week.
I assembled a toolbox.
Cool. Tim?
Come on, you got more than that.
No, he's gonna tell me he assembled his lunch today.
I assembled an actual
workout
rolling
routine.
Toolbox. I mean, I'm not making anything. So here's why I'm not making anything. I can give you a couple reasons. One,
do it.
I'm so short-staffed that I'm working 6 and 7 days a week. My wife is working 6 and 7 days a week because of its tax season. I have this thing called a JOB, a normal job, and as much as I would, and I'm trying to stay healthy, so I'm still beating up on Bob. So I'm doing all these extra things. I don't have a lot of time to be making like I would love to be. I would. Uh-huh. And and on top of that, I'm taking care of 2 houses, my house and my landlord's house. I'm actually taking care of two pieces of property after work. So my weekends are filled with yard work, and if we have a day off together, then we have to go do our grocery shopping, and we do a bike run and all those things. So I am making the best that I can with my life is what I'm making, Phil. But I did assemble a rolling toolbox at work.
At work?
For a tenant. Yeah.
At his jail.
An old 90-year-old dude goes to Harbor Freight and buys the biggest freaking toolbox he can. And I don't know why, because he's got like 2 screwdrivers and an air pump. That's about it. But anyway.
It looks good in that thing, though.
Oh, and listen, but the bright green
You got a tipperoo for that, right?
That doesn't sound like the job. That sounds like extracurricular work.
Yeah, for sure. That's extracurricular.
Yeah. The city paid for it, but that's okay. We take care. It's customer service. So the tip would be, I don't usually say this very often, but the tip would be, you don't have to look at them constantly, but have the instructions right next to you while assembling.
No, we meant cash tip from the 90-year-old guy that
from the
hoodwinked the city into paying you.
Oh, a tip. Oh, I thought you meant because what we do now is so much involving tips that I was... No, I did not get a tip.
No gratuity?
I did not get a gratuity.
He gave you nothing.
He didn't pull
put this thing together for him.
He didn't pull any onions off his belt. Give him the.
Here's the thing, though. This is the gratuity I'm going to get from him. He's probably going to leave me alone, because. No, I guess he won't. I might have screwed up.
He's going to know that you'll do anything for him and doesn't have to pay you.
Yeah,
for free.
Oh no, this is terrible. I made a huge mistake. I got to go.
Go take it apart.
Yeah, imagine you show up. Listen, this was a mistake. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done this. And you take it apart piece by piece and you put it back in the box. That would be
wrapped up.
Just the icing on
and I have to pull the box out of the recycle bin.
Tape it back together.
But again, seriously, that tip, when you're working on something that has this many nuts and bolts and screws and everything, have the destruction book near you and use it to reference. You don't have to read each page or nothing, especially unless you're first time you ever put something together in your life. But for the most part, people say, I don't need the destructions. You do need them. You just don't need to look at them. Have them there.
You don't have to read every word, but just sometimes just looking at the picture to see which way's up,
So here's usually what happens. The biggest thing that happens is you'll have 12 quarter-inch quarter 20 bolts, and you'll have 6 half-inch quarter 20 bolts. You'll end up using and you'll use the 6 ones, the 6 in the wrong place, which it works just fine. But now you need the longer ones, and you don't have them because you put them on that. And that's about taking apart everything you've just done to get those 6 bolts back. Yep.
You know what I do almost every time I put something together where I don't look carefully enough is that there'll be one piece that the front looks the same as the back, and the back looks the same as the front, and looks the same up as it does down, but one of those holes is in a slightly different spot if it's upside down.
Yes.
And then you end up taking the whole thing apart. I do that with Lego.
We have so much in common, guys.
There's a topic in this somewhere.
It's called amateur hour.
Yeah, we should do that next week.
We could do amateur hour part 2 next week and just talk about
it.
All right. I've filled up plenty of space. Phil, do you want to go or do you want Tim to go? If Tim goes, we're 45 minutes. If you go...
I'm okay. No, I want to keep pretending like I did something. So, Tim, you go ahead.
Okay. I'm working on guitars. I think I just finalized a deal for another large guinea pig tank order. Finishing up some guitars I've been working on. I'm starting a couple new ones. I'm doing some acoustic stuff, which I want to learn more about doing and doing better. And I have some ideas that actually kind of ties into the topic about amateur hour. I have some ideas to try some sort of non-traditional things. Like I get these comments on my guitar builds sometimes from people that are like I don't know what you're doing, but it seems to have worked, from like people that like build guitars, or like studied them and stuff. But so I got a couple things I'm excited to try, and I wanted to tell this quick little story that might be useful to some of you to save you and Mike over at Klingspor Woodworking Shop a lot of time. That a couple weeks ago I ordered a whole bunch of sandpaper because I was like, time to stock up, and I try to support the people that support us. So I ordered from Klingspor, and plus they make really good sandpaper. And, I just was stocking up the shop. I was like, okay, I kind of look around. I need some more flat sheets of this. I need some of the, the fine stuff for this. I need it. And one of the things I needed was 220 grit discs for my 5-inch sander, And so I order them. And they come in, and I'm kind of putting it all away. And I open the box because I have this little rack that I put them on. So I take them out of the box and put them in the rack. And as I'm pulling them out, I see a number 150. And I was like, did I order 150 by mistake? Did I mean to order 220? And so I look in the box, it says 220, and I'm looking inside, and it says 150 all over these pieces of the back of the sandpaper. So then I look at another one, and there's no numbers. That happens sometimes, Then I look at another one, it says 220. And then I start going through. So I'm like, this is like a mixed up box. And so I email Klingspor, and it actually turned out to be Mike I ended up talking to. Right away, I was just like, hey, just so you know, like I ordered a box of 220, and there's like, it's like half 150. It's like kind of weird, and then I sent him some pictures, and then there ended up being I ended up like losing the email, and then I got back to it a week later. I was like, hey, I'm still at a 220. Like, I need to figure out what to do here. So I ended up writing back and forth with Mike, and he's like, send me some pictures of it. So I sent him pictures of the back, and then I started digging in and sorting it, and there's like 4 different looking I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, Mike, I think you got
a sample pack.
I'm like, you got a really big problem here, Mike. Like, this is a problem, like, I'm concerned. He's like, do me a favor and send me a picture of the front, like, as close as you can get it in focus. And so I do. And he writes back, he's like, yeah, that's what I thought. And here's where it gets interesting, because Klingspor's, the sandpaper is made in Germany. And they, 220 grit sandpaper, I'm guessing it has to do with the metric equivalent is like 150 like centimeters, because it's like based on per inch, right? Like 220 grit is 220 bumps per inch or whatever. But so like in German, like they'll actually have a different number associated to it, which gets
that'd be 150 per centimeter.
So I guess I'm not quite sure I understand why, but Mike was like, oh, it's all 220. He's like, this is a problem, like that sometimes they cut it from these other sheets of these belts, and it's confusing for us, but But he's like,
So the grit was right, the paper was wrong.
right. Well, the paper was right in
The
German,
labeling.
but it wasn't right in English. So that's like something that Klingspor is working on addressing. So American idiots like me don't get confused because I was like touching it too.
I have never heard of that. I live in a metric country. I have never heard of that.
It was super interesting, but
that just sounds like a shipping problem, right?
it was just they cut it from the wrong sheet.
America
It's not
some
per
metric
square
stuff.
inch or per square centimeter. Grit is the size of the particulate.
I don't think that's true. I think it's the amount of particulate in. I mean, how do you get the size?
No, I
Absolutely
think
not.
Phil's right because you think about it. 60 grit is gigantic grits.
Yeah, 60 bumps per inch.
Yeah.
No,
I used to be in the
size of the
abrasive
grit.
business. I can tell you grit has to do with the size of the particulate, not about the coverage on the paper. Because you can have horrible paper that's got bad coverage, but the particulate's is the right size.
Okay, well, Mike didn't say anything about the metric system. I inferred that. He said that in Germany they call it.
Oh, here we go.
They use the wrong
Amateur
paper.
hour.
That's the bottom line.
No,
Yeah.
he was saying in Germany what they call 150 is the same as what we call 220. So I inferred that it's because probably some kind of weird metric
Because
conversion.
Germans are rougher than we are. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Well, no, because he was like telling me, he's like, and he was right. Like
think
I
it just got
couldn't feel
mislabeled.
I couldn't feel the
he
difference.
gave you the old Klingspor shtick, my friend.
But-
grit is grit.
So did he send you some more 220, or is he making
That's
you
what
use
I
the
want to know.
stuff?
No, it's all 220. And so my point is that don't trust if you order. This is my story. If you order sandpaper from Klingspor, don't trust the paper. Trust Mike.
So this is the part about supporting the companies that support us. Don't trust
$1 billion
Klingspor.
company, call Mike.
Just call
Right.
Mike. No, because he was like he apologized for it and he said that was like it's a mistake. I guess that's happened before where they like cut the wrong paper. So I don't know, but so anyways, people might order sandpaper from Klingspor and it might have the wrong number on some of the sheets. But
So
if it's all in that box,
here's what
that's
I'm
right.
guessing. When you're at the sandpaper factory, and I've never been to one, so since you got to just assume the metric system, I'm going to assume something that happened here. You have paper that you adhere the grit to. And the back of that paper is labeled with the grit size. Somebody screwed up and they put a 150 grit paper on 220 grit.
That's not the way Mike explained it. Don't make me pull
Particulate.
it. I could pull the email up. That's not the way he explained it. He was saying that they use, it was like he said something about cutting it from belts. Like sometimes
Here. The grit of sandpapers is a rating of the size of abrasive materials on the sandpaper. The higher grit number is equivalent to a finer abrasive, which creates smoother surface. Yada yada.
How do you measure that grit? If it's smaller than an inch, you can't measure it as 10 inches. You measure it as 150
If
per
you
inch.
have one grit Tim, it depends upon the size of that grit. A 60 grit piece of grit
60
is going to be
watts.
the size
60
Huh?
watts. 61 hundredths of an inch.
No, not 60 what?
It's a 60 flugels? I mean, what is it? It has to be
I believe
It's a rating. It's a rating by the size. It's a rating
Mike,
by the
60
size. How they rate it.
microns.
Yeah,
What
no,
about
it's
ohms?
It's
Is it microns?
micrometers, actually, micrometers.
Micrometers.
There you go.
So it's metric.
Everything precise is metric.
Well, you were going to read us the email of what Mike actually said because I have a hunch you read two words and then you inferred everything else.
God, I gotta look this up now. Hang on.
I can send you the link from Granger, but like this, they have a whole table on it.
Oh yeah, they have.
I think he misunderstood what Mike said.
Okay, so Mike said. Let me see. We are. Okay. So here's sorry. Could you take? Okay, so Mike writes. Okay, so this happens when you take belt material and offer it in disc form. The print on the back doesn't always match up with the grit number. The 150 you see on the back is actually the manufacturing date. These products should have a P150 if they were 150 grit discs. The P is a European grit measurement, similar to the P220 on the other discs. It's confusing, and we have asked Germany to place the grit in on a diagonal figure across the back of the material, but as you can see, they stay true to their roots.
So you're saying it's a manufacturing date?
So with
That's what he's saying. But there are different. So the difference is now that I'm reading it, there's the CAMI, which is the Coated Abrasives Manufacturing Institute, which is going to be North American, and then there is the FEPA, which is the Federation of European Producers of Abrasives, and there is a difference in what they call certain things. But 150, 180, and 220 are exactly the same thing, except that there's a P in front of it on the European one. So there's no metric imperial difference
So
here.
it's labeled wrong is all it is. It's labeled wrong.
Well, but he's saying
Bingo was his name-o.
No, he's saying it's not labeled wrong. It's labeled confusing. That they put this. The 150 I saw doesn't have a P in front of it. It's a date reference.
But
so
even
they're
if
saying
it
they
did
need
have
to
a
make.
P in front of it, it would still be
What
a 150.
day of the week is 150? Come on.
It could be 150. I don't know what it is, but he's saying that was a date, and so what he's saying is they need to make a date number that's not confusing if the date happens to coincide.
You know what happened? You know what? I know what happened.
I know exactly what happened too, but you tell me. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike actually doesn't know everything. I thought he did, but apparently Mike's not that bright.
I wouldn't go that far. I think.
Well, he's like.
sometimes-
Okay, check it out. A mag light back in the day, right? The big cop-size mag light that took like 4 D-cell batteries. It was like 80 lumens. It was hella bright for in the day. And I think Mike's like an old cop's mag light. But I have this little flashlight right here. This is 1,500 lumens, and it's the size of a...
Wait, is it 1,500 or P1,500?
Yeah, I think it's P1500.
Well, if it was in Europe, it would be
European.
P1500. It's the same lumens. It's just P stands for the Pacific North Rim of the world where the Europeans live.
Yeah. No, but so when I read that was some kind of internal coding number, but the way it's written, it looks like it's smaller than the 220s that I was seeing. But so what he's saying is they need to come up with a better way of putting these internal numbers on so they don't get confused with grits on the occasions where the numbers might be similar.
I know who can handle this. Marcus, if you're listening, buddy, can you take care of this?
Go to the Klingspor factory.
I'll tell you
Change
what
the
happened.
font on the dates.
You ever have an annoying customer that you just want them to go away, and then you switch into a funny accent to explain things? That's what happened here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Tim. Yes, exactly what happened. It was a manufacturing date code. Oh, hello? Other phone ringing. Bye, Tim. Gotta go.
Well, but like I've bought other sandpaper from other people, and there are other numbers on the back. Like that's common, like serial numbers or whatever. But they're not.
Yes.
But they're always pretty obvious to tell that it's not the grit. And on this particular one, that was obviously.
Well, it sounds like Mike is saying
mistake.
the 150 doesn't represent the grit at all. It just happens to be a number of something else. They didn't actually put the grit number on the back.
So the sheets that say 220 are all of them are 220, but just some of them the 220 doesn't appear.
What have
which
you
is
done
another
to
problem.
address this?
Well, with all sandpaper, that's a problem in my opinion because like you get an 8.5 by sheet of sandpaper, right? 8.5 by 11 sheet. You cut it into 6 squares that you're going to use for your sanding blocks or whatever, and like 3 of them have a number on them and 3 of them don't. And then you're like stuck trying to guess which one it was. You have to write it on your back, and so that's something
I can usually tell the grits by looking at it. But
you can.
So Tim, you've got the magic machine. You've got the CNC.
I'll tell you where it's hard to tell is when you're doing like in your 400, 600, 800, 1200, 1500, 2000.
Right. I know.
1200, 1500
You're
hard
right.
to tell apart.
So, but check it out, dude. You've got the magic CNC machine. Why don't you make a series of small little stamps with those numbers on it? Little rubber stamp with the ink pad, and then when you do that, you can just stamp it on the back so you can see each one. I mean, I'm being serious.
No, add that to
I got a better one. Tim, you have a magic Sharpie?
That's what I do. Yeah. Yeah. Add that to the tips section. Is that if you're cutting up your sandpaper, write on the back of it right away before it gets mixed in the pile.
Tip of a Sharpie. Yeah.
I just
keep
thought
one in my
that
pocket.
you'd have the opportunity to tell us about how you made all these stamps next week, but that's okay.
No,
use a Sharpie. I don't care.
Definitely not how I want to spend my time making stamps that say numbers like 150 to 220. So.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't feel that way if they were called guitar stamps or guinea pig stamps. In fact, you made some guinea pig stamps, didn't you?
Oh, I've made a lot of stamps. I use my laser for them. I love making stamps, but not that particular stamp. So that's my stupid sandpaper story. I hope someone learned something.
Long story short, I bought some sandpaper.
And I didn't use it for 2 weeks because I thought it was the wrong sandpaper.
Oh my god, too funny.
It was just one of those things. I never even, and it's like, sure enough, I started looking at it. I'm like, yeah, these are exactly the same. But I didn't. I just looked at the back and I was like, oh, they messed up. I put it, so I just forgot about it. Then like a week went by, and it's just one of those things. Like I never even actually like investigated, and I felt
You
pretty
should have
dumb about
gone last because that ties into our topic.
It does. It does. So we're a bunch of amateurs.
Yeah, amateur hour. What did I do? I did some stuff. Okay, so I did a massive garage cleanup.
Nice.
And we had all kinds of stuff in there that had to do with winter and the rinks and kits and and I took down my rink, so that meant basically taking down. It spent 3 hours to take it down. About 300 or 400 screws had to come out, and I really wished that I could have kept the plywood. I would have used it, but it all was soaking wet and got delaminated. So it was just all coming apart. And it was warped. It had to go.
Sounds like you got a bunch of veneer now.
Yeah, veneer.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Construction grade.
Horrible, ugly
3/8 inch
veneer. Yeah,
it's awful. I would have loved to have used it, but I kept all the 2x4s because they were good.
Yeah.
So the 2x4s are what's holding the outside of the rink together?
No, so they have these plastic brackets that they're reusable, and you screw them into the 2x4s that act as the top rail, and then the plywood acts as the face, so the boards of the rink. So then the plastic gets pounded into the ground with camping stakes.
So plywood and 2x4 makes up the side of the rinks.
2x4 makes the top, and plywood makes the side.
Okay.
And then the plastic is let's say an inverted V support, and then that gets pounded into the ground with, like I said, camping stakes.
And it just sits on the ground itself. The liner sits on the ground.
Yes.
And so what makes the seam there? Does the liner come up the bank to keep?
Yeah. So what you'll do is before you put the plywood in, you put the liner on.
Right.
And so that's up and over, and then you'd staple that to the 2x4, which is the handrail, and then you'd put in the plywood.
Yeah.
So it's bare plywood that you're shooting the puck against, but the liner sort of goes up and.
But you could paint it and make it look all pretty if you wanted, and put logos.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use a different kit. I gave this kit away. I'm gonna use a different kit next year. One that this kit that I took down myself was one of the 4 first prototypes, basically that I did. Right. And I realized that I hate it, so I sourced a different one. And that's what I did for my 60 clients, and so I much prefer that kit, both from ease of use, from material use. Like, there's no 2x4s for this other kit. It's only 3/4 inch plywood, and the 3/4 inch plywood, because I've already taken down about 5 or 6 of them for clients, it lasts, right?
Yeah.
Like, it actually, it's much stronger.
Right.
The 3/8 inch just came apart like nothing.
And if you get exterior grade plywood, the 3/4 exterior grade plywood should be able to get 2 seasons easily, you know?
The thing with the other kit is that it works differently. It's the liner goes over the wood, so it protects it all year. It protects it all winter long. My plywood was exposed to the elements and water and ice and sun and all this stuff, so it was finito. But the other kit, the liner protects it, and then you could, if you wanted to, which I didn't do it for people, but I might, is you can take like Coroplast sheets and cut them into the right size, and then put that, and then sort of screw that on top of the wooden boards. So you've got protection for the liner and to bounce the puck off it, and also your plywood is protected for the following year, which is a much, much better system. So I did that. So we have got this wooden play set that it looks like a clubhouse with some swings and a slide and whatever, and it's basically right behind where the net was all winter. And so this thing got the snot kicked out of it. All these, the boards got, the clubhouse is made out of wood, and they've got boards that go across, and a lot of them were smashed from the puck. And so I spent some time just cutting up and making it actually shiplap, so I had to do the grooves in it and replacing all those, so I did a bunch of those, and I put the finish on that door handle that I talked about last week, so that's just about ready to go and off my mind. I'm trying to think if I did anything else. I think that's about... have you seen these KiwiCo kits? Do you know what I'm talking about?
The craft ones?
Yeah, so they're like these one of these membership boxes, and every month they come with like a science experiment or some kind of a thing for kids to do. So one of them, the one that my daughter got this week, got it for my daughter. It was one of these, you build it out, and it's basically a grabber claw, right? So they call it an arcade machine, but it's not an arcade machine. That's just a cool word for it, because they think of like one of those things where you put in $1 and you move the joystick and it comes down and grabs a bear or something. But instead, this is just basically an arm that lets you pick up trash, I guess, if you wanted to. So my daughter, we built it out for her, and it was fun. We had followed the instructions. It was great. And then my boys were like, we want one too. I was like, yeah, I don't see any more parts in the box, boys. Sorry. So what I did was I took hers apart, and then, because it's all made out of laser cut, like 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch plywood, I just traced all the parts and just made 2 more with the bandsaw. And so that was, so I got all my kids running around with these little grabbers. But
that could be a tip segment.
With trace out parts?
Well, let's create more kits out of your one kit.
Yeah, so it was fun. I mean, obviously mine weren't as nice as the laser cut ones, but they certainly did the job, and that was fun. It was fun sort of doing it, and also like I involved my eldest with it also, so he got to see what it took to basically make something from something else, like reverse engineering it and then making it again. And we had to figure out the hardware, right? Because this thing came with all these little plastic nuts and bolts. So now we had to use metal nuts and bolts. So we had to figure out how to do that, and like finding them out of all the scraps that I have and stuff. So it was a cool exercise. It was fun. But I think they're great kits because they, I don't know, they make it really easy to follow along. And my daughter was super into it. So I like that.
That's cool.
But horrible marketing. It's not an arcade. It's a grabber claw. Call it an arcade.
You know, speaking of tips, Phil.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Speaking of... Great segue. Speaking of tips, I want to bring up this week's sponsor of our weekly tip segment, and that, of course, is IsoTunes. So IsoTunes is a family-run company, and we love them both as a company and for the products they make. I specifically love... they make hearing protection, obviously, and so the hearing protection model that I use are called the Lynx, the IsoTunes Lynx, and they're over-ear cans. They're Bluetooth, so you can listen to music or podcasts or whatever you want, but I say it week in, week out, and this is the God's honest truth. What I use it for is to make sure that I'm not missing any phone calls and I'm not missing any texts, so that I know when I'm in the garage, if I don't hear any pings or bongs or whatever in my ears, I know I'm good to stay in there, I'm good to chill out. You know, don't rush, don't stress. No one's trying to reach me. I'm good. And if there is an issue, I'll hear the beep. I can stop what I'm doing safely, and I can look at my phone. Oh, okay, they just want to know my apple pie recipe, and I can, continue working. So that's, for me, it's a lot of peace of mind. And I also like that they're really good hearing protection. I think as we sort of get older, we realize how critical all of these things are, and that we are not... bulletproof, and that we've got to protect our hearing, we've got to protect our bodies, we've got to protect our eyes, all of these things. And it's, I think it's one that gets left behind. We always wear safety glasses, but a lot of the times we forget to put on hearing protection, and it's such an important one. And I think this product addresses it so well.
Yeah,
I have to concur.
Well, all right then. Look at that.
Good
Unanimity in a lot of.
I'm wearing them right now.
I should have concurred. Okay, and because we love the product so much, because we love the company so much, we partnered with them. They're our weekly tip sponsor. But the other thing is for another 4 weeks, we are accepting tips for this tip segment, either by email, or you can send us a voice note through email, and you will get entered into a draw to win a pair of IsoTunes. And you can always check out what they have in their lineup, isotunes.com/reclaimedaudio. And you go to that landing page, you will see our coupon code, which is reclaim10, and you get $10 off of a set, and that equals anywhere between 10 and 15 or even 18% off. So it's a great deal, and even more importantly than the deal, you're supporting the companies that support your content creators. And
even
the
if they
community
label
itself.
those things wrong, it doesn't matter.
That's right, because they are P IsoTunes. What?
even if they say they're hearing damagers, what they mean to say is...
yeah, hearing protectors. It's a European standard thing.
It's metric. Yeah,
it's metric. Yeah, just metric haters. But yeah, so support the companies that support the stuff you like to listen to, and then we get to stay on the air. So that's always a great thing.
So we have a couple tips from listeners that are now officially entered into this competition, and the first one is from, speaking of metric, from our friend Richard Martin, who lives in England and has been in my kitchen. He's visited America a few years back. And Richard wrote, if you're wondering about getting some IsoTunes and you live here in the UK, then you can still get them, and the Reclaimed 10 discount code still works. It knocks $10 off, not £10, but it still works even here in the UK, which is really, really Eastern Connecticut, basically. Just Google IsoTunes UK for the UK site, and they are really good gear too. From Richard in sunny Sheffield, very, very Eastern Connecticut. So he's correct.
That's kind of really that's big news. Seriously, because we wondered about this, and now that we know that they actually are all over the world, we need to say that. IsoTunes, way to go.
So you can get them.
And Sheffield is where they made all the Bailey planes, and they still made all the chisels, like the marples. It's quite the heritage, that spot of the world.
Yes.
Great tooling.
Yeah, it's Eastern Connecticut. Yeah, it's great.
Eastern Connecticut.
Way eastern.
Yeah.
Way.
Well, I mean, because Connecticut's in New England, and then that's just, England is just an extension of New England.
Old England, right.
Right, the other England.
Jolly old. Yeah, the other England, yeah.
And we have one more tip from Noah Coleman. Love the show. I've been listening for years. My tip is for making a straight line around a tube for cutting, especially if the tube is bendy or in a place where you can't lay it down flat. You can put a hose clamp on the tube and use that as a straight edge to mark all the way around, or as a guide for the saw if you're careful. Keep up the good work. And that is a great tip.
You know what? That is such a fantastic, simple, amazing tip.
One of those, why didn't I think of it,
Yep. I mean, seriously, a hose clamp is, oh my gosh, that is, can we just cheat and make him the winner?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that.
Now if he wins, we're going to be accused of cheating. You ruined it for everyone.
Well, now we can't let him win.
Yeah, now he has to lose. Sorry, buddy. Great tip,
but now he
lost.
has something. Oh no!
Thank Bill for that
That's
one.
terrible. Well, seriously though, that is such an amazing tip because it can be used for anything too. Because you can connect a lot of hose clamps if you have a large diameter pipe. I have reclaimed gigantic, those big blue water pipes that, from construction sites that are like 24-inch diameter. I mean, the gigantic ones. I've reclaimed those before and tried to cut them up nice and straight, made flower pots and stuff out of them. Trying to use masking tape or something to draw a straight edge around it.
Never get a straight edge, yeah.
Pipe clamp. Pipe clamp.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you got to do. It's so simple. Or a hose clamp, I mean.
Hose clamp. Yeah.
Hose clamps come pretty big, but again, you can attach. You can daisy chain those hose clamps and make a gigantic one. This is genius. I love it. I love it. Thank you.
I think by the time you get to that
Bill, do you like the tip at all, or do you like it? That was a good one.
I think by the time you get to that 24-inch around, but I mean, I guess because you can get those hose clamps in like 10, 12 inches, right? I mean, they make them that big. So yeah, you just.
Well,
but even if you do get them in 6 inches, they're still longer than 6 inches.
But that's a ton to put together. You know what I mean? But if you
got
a couple 12 inches, it's like three.
It's not that many,
hose clamps.
But think about this. So let's take it a step further. You can use water heater strap, right?
Yeah.
What's that?
A water heater strap.
You could use a woodworking band clamp, by the way.
A woodworking band clamp. I'm just saying, there's so many different things that you can do to make a straight line out of on a pipe.
Well, I was thinking that too about like if you were to grab like a bungee cord or something like that, but there's still a chance for it being wrong. You'll be more accurate, but there's still a chance for being wrong. Whereas the metal,
what you need is you need for it to be flat.
Right. Because
you
could
do
twist
that with
Yeah.
So
you can twist it tight, but it's not going to sit flat.
One of the things I used to do before this idea, which I will use from now on, is I would tie a string around it.
Yeah.
Right? Make sure it looks just about as perfect as I can. And then you take a spray paint real quick and just, and then when you take the string back off, now you've got a line drawn on there. But the hose clamp is just so easy. And anyway.
You could do the same thing with the hose clamp. It's just that the hose clamp guarantees that it's straight because it lies flat.
Right. Well, with the hose clamp, you can just draw, take a Sharpie and then.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because it's not moving. It's a perfectly flat.
Well, like
that's the genius of it.
If you're real comfortable with your angle grinder, you can just go right around with that thing and just leave the clamp on and use it as a guide. But you got to be careful.
Well, if you're using like a portaband, I wouldn't be afraid to use a portaband and just cut
nice
right through it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Amazing.
So
using a portaband for your 24-inch diameter hose, though.
No, that's chainsaw.
That's a big portaband. Yeah.
I would love to have
the reciprocating saw, just screw everything up.
30-inch throat portable bandsaw.
That's a big one.
I'll take my 14-inch Craftsman and lie it on its side.
Okay.
T.S. Wandell's done that. Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, he probably has. So, yes.
I was gonna say, so we're done with that thing, but we got some interaction with somebody else. I thought it would be fun to just kind of bring I just thought it was a neat idea. Maybe we can get some interaction with our audience. Dean Koss wrote to us, and we're always telling people, hey, don't don't be afraid to write to us, message us, whatever, if you have questions or ideas or whatever. So this guy writes, he's basically, long story short, he had a compound miter saw, right, where you can pull it in and out and go up and down, and the motor burned out. So he's like, hey guys, what can I do with this? Instead of like, I don't want to repair it, but what can I use this mechanism for? And of course, Tim, well, I think it'd be funny to tie a saw blade to it and just move it back and forth. But
because it would be.
Bless you, Tim.
Yeah,
it would be
exactly how he sounds.
Yeah,
so
you
funny.
can cut straight lines through anything round with that.
That's true.
But anyway, if anybody has an idea of what you
Yes.
could do with that, right? Like some kind of a, I don't know, something
Hose clamp and
nonsensical,
angle
art
grinder
piece,
to it.
Maybe make it a miniature chop saw. Use an angle grinder
For metal.
That could be something, right? Because I turned an angle grinder into a bench grinder.
Yeah.
And showed people how to do that. Maybe using that to attach an angle grinder to would turn it into like a mini chop saw.
Yeah.
I don't know how
Yeah.
practical that would
Like
be.
a metal
but
saw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you've got a 7-inch ankle grinder on there, Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
just thought I'd throw that out there. And thank you, Dean, for interacting. We love hearing from everybody. And
Yeah, and if
guys
anybody
make
has
it
any
all
ideas or experience with repurposing a broken compound sliding miter saw, we're all ears. And you can email it to us and we'll relay the information.
Yeah. Just run it past our lawyer. That's at counsel@timsway.net.
I would love it if we got slammed.
Do you ever
with
check
it.
that email? We could have a whole bunch of tips in there, by the way.
I think it just comes to my email. I don't know. So.
Oh, way to ruin the gag, Tim.
Oh, I mean my lawyers. I haven't talked to my lawyer in months. Oh my god.
Exactly. Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Yeah, exactly. All right.
Speaking of amateurs,
Do you know any? Can we get them on the podcast?
the topic idea this week is amateur hour, but it's not. Usually when people say amateur hour, it's like an insult. It's like, oh, it's
Yeah,
the
it sure
amateur
is.
hour. Here come the people that don't know what they're doing. But what we want to do is celebrate the amateur and really revel in what amateurs can do that professionals can't. And I was inspired by a podcast I heard today that got me thinking about it. But I kind of realized that many of us, even though I do this for a living, I still kind of consider myself an amateur. And one of the things about being an amateur is that I don't know how the date is applied to sandpaper made in Germany. But what that means
You
is,
got the business on that one. I don't think that's a thing.
but you know what? What I like about not knowing stuff sometimes is that like we get to learn all these things. Whereas like, so suppose I went to like woodworking school and and then people are like, oh, this is this sandpaper, this is the 220. I might not be as quick to question. Whereas like when I'm doing stuff for myself, and I think there's something about the sort of the amateur spirit of like all of us in our garages like questioning and making mistakes, and that can lead to some discovery and some like potential like creative things happening that wouldn't necessarily happen in a professional environment. Like I've always said, I'm always trying to like find the 13th note when there's only 12. That's a pretty amateur thing, right? Because we know that there's 12 notes. There's no 13 notes. But if we have that amateur sort of mindset of like looking for it, what can maybe we can discover something.
Let me tell you what amateur means, which you probably know this already, but just in case. Amateur, the word itself is French, and it means lover of things or something that you're intensely passionate about. So it's actually not an insult. It means that the thing that we are talking about is something you love so so much that you focusing your time on it. And so I think it's a huge compliment to call someone an amateur because it means the thing that they're doing is something that they love and they're passionate about. Whereas when you're a professional, you may or may not love the thing that you're doing, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is a job and you're doing it to make money.
Right.
And I'm not saying that you can't be passionate about something that you make money at because I'm intensely passionate about selling ERP. But it's not the same feeling as when I'm in the garage making things. I do that strictly because I love it. And the reason I started doing this in the first place is because I fell in love with it, and I absolutely adore every minute that I get to be in there. And so it's a very different thing, and as you say, I think the risk-reward is very different when you're doing something to feed your family versus doing something because you strictly love it and you're open to experimentation, you're open to seeing what can happen if you're a little bit more loosey-goosey about what the quote-unquote rules are of something. And so like an example of risk-reward, would I try a whole new way of doing something if it meant that I could potentially lose my entire day of production? I'll tell you right now, heck no. I'm going to continue doing it the way I know because it's guaranteed and because I need to continue feeding my family. Whereas if I was just making a table because I love making tables and I'm having fun, would I try something new? Absolutely. What do I have to lose? A little bit of my time? Sure, but I have the opportunity to learn something new or different or innovate or all that stuff. And that's just my opinion, by the way. These are not hard and fast rules.
No, it's opportunity. I mean, being a professional it can mean many things, right? If you work for a cabinet shop, you're a professional. You're inside of a cabinet shop. You're in a production type setting, and things are set up to work a certain way. You are not afforded the opportunity to experiment with something. It's either going to work. You're slamming through. You're using a certain jig to get things done. You're putting these things. You're assembling these things as they go. It's an assembly line sort of process. Things work the way they work, and if something messes up, you have the resources because you work in a cabinet shop to like, okay, to put that door to the side, it's a no-go, it's no good, and you start up again. Where you have the opportunity in your shop, in your garage, it's like, yeah, I'm going to make a set of cabinets for somebody. They commissioned it from me. I'm in the middle of doing something. I ran out of something. I'm an amateur, right? But I have the opportunity. Maybe I don't have the hardware that I ran out of something. I can make something. I can, there's so many things you can do and experiment being an amateur that you can't in a professional setting. So I think that's not.
I think there's another component there also. One, of course, is that in your example, you work for somebody else and they have their processes that they've outlined and that say, Bill, you were essentially you're a very important part of this existing process that we've set up, and this is the way we would like for you to do it.
Correct.
And for you to sort of invent something new on the fly because you want to experiment is not really a freedom you're normally afforded. You may if you bring it up, but I think
right.
I think we're really talking about is if like even if you're a business owner, right, and you decide you want to try something intentionally very new, that's your prerogative to do as a business owner. But there's an opportunity cost, there's a risk associated with doing something like that because you could lose your entire day of production.
That's what I was saying. I mean, I agree with you. Yeah. So being in a certain setting, you can't really afford to take these chances, these risks, try something new. Even if you're doing something like, what, I bet you it would be easier to try it this way. That's not the time and the place to do that. You might go at the end of the day, you might say, hey, boss, I'd like to talk to you about something.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you can set up a time and a place that reduces that risk. But at home, the amateur in his garage doesn't have to worry about it. Whether you're making a living for yourself, as Tim does, and he's his own boss. Like you said, you still think of yourself as an amateur because you're not in that machine shop type setting. You're not working for a production company with employees with deadlines and stuff in that way. But you still have the opportunity. Now, it could be risky too. You could try something new on one of your guitar builds that's a commission and screw it up, and you basically got to scrap the entire thing.
I've done it.
It's like,
but that's the luxury of the way I've set up my business and the way I work. Is
correct.
That, like I have one commission right now that I'm doing that. I have no idea if it's going to work. I got some ideas for how to put together this acoustic guitar that I want to try, and I've taken the guy's money, so I've got to make it work. So somehow I'll make it work, But like the processes I'm doing, if I went up to I went to the Gibson Guitar Factory and said, well, this is how I'm thinking about making this guitar. I'm going to do this. They'd be like, you're fired. Like, get out of here.
Super fired.
Yeah. Like we'll mail you your stuff. Get out of our shop, But because I work the way I work, and again, I have other, missions that I'm seeking. It's not just about necessarily making the best guitar or making the most profitable guitar. It's like I have all these, environmental missions and these waste missions and material missions that I'm on. So I feel very lucky. There's no doubt about it. But what I always think about, with this topic is that I can't remember. I don't even know if it's a true story, but it's just a story that's told about a blind piano player, a jazz player, and he was just, blind, and he was just learning to play by ear, and he would listen to records and copy them. And one day he was listening to, I think it was like a Tchaikovsky piece that was for two piano players for four hands, and he learned it because he didn't know he couldn't play it. And that's like sort of the joy of being an amateur. Like anybody else that could have seen the record would have been like, oh, well, this is for two people. I can't do it by myself. But he didn't know. He just started playing. He goes, man, this guy's good. He's like, I gotta up my game. And he figures out a way to play this music like pretty darn close to, to what's happening. And and it's just like, wow, like that's the beauty of being an amateur, right? Is like there's no rules, like there's no one that says you can't.
Right. Well, there's looser, like, what you're allowed to do is more, there's more room for experimentation, I think, a lot more. And I bring up the example of, even when I was doing woodworking for money, let's say, but it was always a side hustle. It's the Etsy thing, right? So I would always try new ways of building a whiskey box just to keep things interesting for myself and to see if there was a better way to do it, to batch them out. But I'll tell you one thing, when my back was up against the wall and I needed to get these things out, like I had an order for 5 or 10 of these things and it was, December 22nd and these things had to be there for Christmas, I went back to my tried and true. There was no experimentation being done. There was, okay, we know how to do this, let's get it out. But on a normal basis, if I got an order for one, I was like, you know what, maybe I'm going to try half labs. Maybe I'm going to try, let's try rabbits.
Yeah.
Let's try pin nailer. Let's try screws and plug covers. Let's try, there was a million different things that I would try just to keep things interesting. But at the end of the day, when it was time to get these things out, there was no more playing around.
Yeah.
It was I know what I know, and that's it.
Well, that's when you're no longer the amateur at that point, because you had 10 orders and it was December 22nd. That's the professional stepping and saying we got to finish these.
Right. Yes. 100%. 100%.
Well, we talked a lot about in the past limitations, and sometimes the amateur hour is forced upon you because when you are working in a production type setting or you're working for a professional company or you have the resources that they do, again, I go back to that, you have the tools that you need. Sometimes in your shop you don't have all the tools you need. And it's amateur hour, man, do what you do. Now, safety police, just relax your little, just relax yourselves. But I will constantly take an angle grinder, throw it in my vise, and zip tie the thing on and use it in that way. And that's because I don't have a specific type of grinder or the tool that I need. But that's...
Keep talking about what you're doing. What is it you're doing with that operation? Because now I'm interested.
Well, for example, when I was making the giant ice pick, right? An easy way for me to sharpen that ice pick, or the end of it, was to clamp the angle grinder into a vise, turn it on, stick the big metal rod into my drill, and then use that spinning on the grinder to put a nice sharp point on it. What I'm saying,
you're
though,
far
is
enough
that
away, you'll be fine if it blows up.
What's the worst that could happen?
But there's another time I built the big light table. Scott Turner told me I had to build something, and I cut this big aluminum light fixture on my table saw by ducking down, so if it flew off, it wouldn't hit me in the head. This one. Right? But it's like you can try those things as an amateur, or maybe you're forced to, because I didn't have the type of saw that I could cut that with and get the straight line that I wanted. So there's these forced limitations.
Also no OSHA in your garage.
So my question is to you guys: Have you found something that maybe you were forced to do, Phil, because your whiskey box is like, look, I do got to make 10 of these things. I need to get these. Was there anything that you can think of, either one of you, some kind of limitation, something that as an amateur you could do, a process that you could do that maybe wouldn't happen if you were in a shop that you had all the tools that you needed, whether it be a welder or a sander, whatever it might be? What did you come up with as an amateur to get the job done?
I'll hop in here real quick because I a lot of the times the innovation, quote unquote, and the way that I was able to speed up my processes was by buying new tools. So for example, when things weren't flush, right, I would say, you know what I really need? I need a stationary belt sander. So I'd buy a stationary belt sander because I thought that was going to help me do things faster. Like it was going to help me flush up the lid and the box, for example, or an air nailer because I thought it was going to help me move faster by just being able to pin the box together and keep working. And sometimes that was true and it did help, and sometimes it wasn't true and it didn't help. But it was part of, I guess, the gear acquisition syndrome, and so that helped me. That kind of stuff helped me build out my shop because it was justification for both me and my significant. Yes, Lauren, I'm going to spend $100, but it's going to help me make these things faster. And so that was great justification. And sometimes it was true and it did help me, and sometimes it didn't, but it was useful for, there's at no point in your woodworking career is a stationary sander not going to be useful. So it definitely was useful, but not specifically for speeding things up. So I didn't necessarily find an alternate way of doing something, but what it did do was open my eyes to buying a new tool that potentially would help me.
Well, and it teaches you to be able to do that when the time comes, right? It's like the risk part of that is pretty low. It's like, this may not work out, but I'm certainly going to be able to use this tool again. So there's no real risk there.
Yeah, no question, for sure. And things like I used to for the hinges, I used to mortise them in, with a chisel. Essentially, I would do them by hand. I'd hand mortise them, and then I had a very generous fan who essentially sent me a plunge router. Now, the plunge router was genius for being able to do these mortises because you could put the exact depth of the hinge into the depth stop and set it exactly, and then it just steps down the exact right amount. And that was beautiful. I just had to finish up whatever by hand, like a tiny little nothing of it. So that definitely did help, although I didn't spend any money on that. But that was a great acquisition. I mean, a plunge router in a woodworking shop, that's got to be a top 5 next level tool.
Yeah.
What about you, Tim? What has being a quote-unquote amateur afforded you to do that maybe you couldn't do if you were working for Gibson or at the chef,
Fender,
whatever, working for Gordon Ramsay or something like that? I mean, what has amateurishness afforded you?
I mean, just about everything. Like just my whole approach is just so uneducated, and so unencumbered by the thought process of just
we got to write that down. Unencumbered by the thought process.
It's not an original thought. It's
no. Unencumbered by convention, I think, would be the nicer way of saying that.
I think it was the car talk guys who used to refer to fixing cars, but being unencumbered by the thought process. I think that's where I picked that up from, and I liked it. But
very nice.
Yeah, just like I remember like 5 or 6 years ago when I made this batch of guitars out of reclaimed wood, and like there's all these things that I did. I was like, oh well, who says I was using all these scraps of these pieces and stuff, and I was like, well, who says the wood has to run vertical? I'll run it the other way, and then of course you put the guitar, and you realize like, oh, the string tension will actually cause it to snap. If the grain is going the wrong direction, it was a loose grain, the guitar starts to fold up on itself. So then I'm like, oh, how do I strengthen it? And so I started routering some slots in and putting some cross-directional wood to hold it, make it stronger again until I get it strong. And I ended up having like Eddie Van Halen-looking guitar, and it ended up being like this like really cool piece, It's like, this is a really like very unique. The wood's going the wrong way. It's got all these like crisscross like reclaimed mahogany stripes in it to hold it together. And if I opened up a book on guitar and they said you can't do the wood that way, I never would have made that. And I have I have hundreds of stories like this of just where I basically just create my own problems and then solve them, and that's the true passion of what I'm doing and what I love to do is just that I'm going to create a problem. I have to make a guitar. All I have are a bunch of hollow core doors. How can I do it and go, and make a guitar that works.
But that's how you learn, right?
Exactly.
So I go back to being 10 years old and learning computers, right? Like I'm still very much into it, but I was very into computers at a time when being into computers was not a cool thing to do. But I loved computers. And when did I learn the most? When I broke something. Mm-hmm. And it was usually, there was no internet at the time to look things up, right? So if I was upgrading a CPU and they didn't have these things like the little notches of which direction it was supposed to go back into the socket. You put it in, you power it on, you put it in the wrong one. That's a smoke show, baby. Oh, yeah. This thing's finished. Yeah, for sure. Letting the magic smoke out, right? It was no good. So, okay, now I got to spend $200 on a new 486 DX66 whatever processor, and I would take it in. But that's how I learned. I learned by making mistakes and fixing them, and just doing that over and over again and iterating until I stopped making serious mistakes, only made small ones.
I think we're getting at the crux of this here. So like if you get a job, say like you want to be a woodworker, so you get a job in a cabinet shop, and I have these stories in my cooking years like that, there's going to be a way that they're going to do things, and they're going to teach you like this is how you do this and this is how you do this. And I wonder, and I don't think we have time to answer this in this week, but is it better to learn by going into the shop and messing it up yourself, or to have someone that's already messed it up teach you to save you those mess ups? Which way is the better way to learn?
I think
depends
the
on the
better
way you learn.
Yeah.
Well, to answer this question simply, yes, I think it's better to have somebody teach you by their mistakes, because you are going to afford yourself so many mistakes all by yourself.
Right, it's going to save you those mistakes, then you can go create your own mistakes.
But knowing that, that's one of the biggest lessons I ever learned was that, you know what, it's okay to make a mistake, because look, when I first started doing this, I screwed this up and it was okay. So don't be afraid. But now you know how to do this thing. You don't have to make the same mistake I did. But in the future, I promise you again, I made plenty of mistakes, you know, from just trying things that didn't work out. So yeah, I think it's better to learn from somebody, you know. I'm not saying that you can't go into a situation as a quote unquote amateur and you know, make your own mistakes and everything. But if you have the opportunity to learn from somebody else, always take that opportunity every single time.
I mean, without question, you're 1,000% right. But I'm going to ask both of you gentlemen this: how many people do you know in your life that only know how to learn the hard way?
I know a few people like that.
Yeah.
My entire family, except for me, is like that.
Well, now I would say it depends upon what it is, because when you have a knack for something, when you have a skill set that you've learned, certain things come easy to you, and you're able to figure things out. But you put anything in front of me that's computer related, and I'm going to have to learn the hard way for the most part, right? I mean,
even simple things though. Like, don't forget to pay your taxes on time, otherwise it's going to cost you big money.
I'm not paying them, blah, blah, blah.
Well, now you're this is an amateur hour, though. Those are just stupid people, right?
I mean, my brothers, yes, you're absolutely right. No, but sometimes people only learn the severity, how serious something is, by experiencing the fallout themselves.
Yeah.
And my father was the same way, but he would say things to me like, Phil, take care of your teeth because they're super important, because they cost you a lot of money later on in life. Okay, makes sense to me. Learn that lesson. But then you look at my brothers and like, what did Dad know? Meanwhile, they're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on teeth repair. Like, why couldn't you just listen to him? He gave you good advice.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many levels to that, right? I mean, who do you choose to take advice from, right? It's based upon experience. I'm not going to go to, there's some people that I've worked for. Well, there's members of my family like you that I don't care what advice they gave me. I don't care if they were, you know, the CEO of a bank and they told me, look, save a penny every day. I am not saving a penny just because you told me to, because I know how much of an idiot you are. But there's also other people that's like, look, I'm not going to take advice from accounting from Jimmy, right? But if Jimmy said to do anything as far as making is concerned, it's gospel. It's gospel.
Right. And if your dad had a bunch of crowns and he's telling me how to brush my teeth, you know.
Yeah, I might listen.
Yeah. Wouldn't you think the guy who made all those mistakes would have a good way around it?
Well, you know, that's another one too. Like the woodworking, the shop teacher missing the finger, you know, and he's telling you about safety.
Right.
You're at 12. You're like, oh, this guy is missing his pinky.
Use a push stick.
What do you know? You know, it's like, this is what I know.
He knows.
Well, Stumpy over here, he knows.
He knows, yeah. Anyways.
All right, let's wrap
great
this
topic.
up.
This was a lot of fun. I like this
Yeah,
one.
it was.
Yeah. Amateur podcasting.
Yeah. What grabbed your attention? Let's go to Tim this time. What grabbed your attention?
Okay, you know what? We do have a couple reviews, but we're running kind of late. Why don't we save them for next week? Because they're pretty good, and I want to give them the attention they deserve.
Yeah, they are actually really good.
Yeah. So what I'm into, I have two things. One is I wanted to mention my wife and I watched this show called Home. It's on Apple TV, and it's one of those, like, there's always those shows about houses, and I always kind of feel like that, like, you know, like the dream home and the crazy home, and they're always like, you won't believe this guy lives in an upside down turtle shell or what, and it's like always like this kind of, you know, they're like, they're just sort of silly, or it's like, you know, like lifestyle.
I won't believe that.
Or it's like lifestyles of the rich and famous, where it's just a showing off their infinity pool that goes around the house, and, you know, the $1 million refrigerator or whatever. But this show on Apple was really special. It's about people that are challenging the way we look at homes and what homes are. And it was beautiful, and it was beautifully filmed, and it was more like documentaries about these people's lives. And like these guys that were some of the first to 3D print houses with 3D printers that poured mortar,
concrete,
and stuff, and just what beautiful people they are. You know, this woman that built these bamboo palaces, and I think it was in Thailand, And like she's like, yeah, this entire house everything here was just grown in the past 5 years. You want to talk about sustainability? Use bamboo.
Yeah.
And really neat show. And then the other one I wanted to mention was a YouTube channel. This guy, he calls this channel Scar My Guitar, and I've been emailing back and forth on a little bit. He's a guitar builder, and he's got this really cool guitar bridge that he's developing. It's basically like acoustic guitars tend to not be something you can intonate, which is where you can like fine tune the strings by adjusting the length of them. Whereas electric guitars have these, very fine tuned little pieces of metal that go up and down and back and forth and stuff. And so he's been experimenting with modifying acoustic guitar bridges to hold these metal saddles off of an electric guitar to make them as intonatable as electric guitars. And it's very, but what I love about his video is he kind of starts it off with what we're talking about right now. He's just like, sort of like, what, well, why, you can't do this, they say. He's like, well, why not? Like, he's like, why, let's find out. Like, kind of just has that, like, I've made guitars before and they're telling me I can't do this, but you telling me I can't do it means I'm going to try harder, and that's kind of like the spirit of the garage, maker, that we are. And, so it seems like a perfect week to talk about it.
Absolutely.
I love it. What about you, Bill?
So I've got a couple of things too. One is Mike Montgomery, Modern Builds. He is, because you were talking about housing, Tim, and different ways of living. He bought a house in California, of all places, but it was only $80,000, and it's in Joshua Tree, and it's this little house, and it needs some love. And so he's going to be spending however long. That's his shtick now for his videos. He turned a plywood shed basically into his new workshop. And the way he did it was so anyway. Also Ben Wedd is out there. He's the big learning how to live differently in different types of housing. He's very much into that. Jesse's out there working on a house. Skull and Spade, Brett McAfee's out there also, but Mike's actually making these videos. He's documenting how he's going to fix up this house, and I find he just finished his shed shop makeover, and it's pretty cool. And then the other thing, I just got to say it. I've been watching it for years now. I just love it. I don't care who doesn't. The Walking Dead. I can't wait for the next episode to come out on season, I think 10 they're on now. And I love it. Gotta love it.
That show ended. That show's still going on?
It's not only going on, but it's got 2 new offspring. So even when it ends, they'll carry the Fear of the Walking Dead and Walking Dead New World or something like that.
Huh. Good for you. I have a similar thing. I always have a challenge when I sort of like stop watching a show and then I go to pick it back up again. I always find it so challenging to do that because you have to get back into the mind frame of where you were and like where you left off exactly and what episode did I forget? And then you pick up where you knew you left off, but it still doesn't have that same, attraction or whatever. Anyway, so the show that I just recently picked back up again is called Mr. Robot. I don't know if anybody saw it, but it's
I watched the whole thing, dude. It's so amazing.
I know. It's really good. So Mr. Robot is essentially a show about a hacker with multiple personality disorder. But I will tell you this as somebody who's been in the space, the hacking they do in this show
Oh, I thought you meant the multiple
real.
personality disorder. That would have explained a lot, but go ahead.
That would have explained a lot, I know. But the hacking is real. Everything they show you is real. The software they use is real. The techniques they use are real. Like, the things that they do are real. Like, anything that's in the show that you're seeing, they're like, no, it's not like CSI Miami where you got 2 people hacking on a keyboard together at the same time because they've got to defeat somebody else. That's nonsense. Yeah. Everything in this is sick, and it's real. I'm like, oh my God, wow, did they just really show somebody how to do an exploit? That's insane. It's all real stuff. So it lends it, like, if you know your stuff about this stuff,
I dig that.
You're very impressed by the writing, by the actual, like, hacker stuff that they do. It's next level, and the story is incredible. It's just really, really cool.
I can tell you, Casey and I are not anywhere near knowing any of what you just said, but the show is so fantastic. The storyline, the acting, we're ready to do it again. That's how good it is. Yeah. We've watched the entirety of the series. We're ready to rewatch it again because it's just one of those shows. It's like, I can do that again. It's that good.
Yeah, it's really good. It's Rami Malek and Christian Slater. So Rami Malek is the one who played Freddie Mercury in the Queen movie. So.
Oh, really?
He just did a movie with, it was really good too, with Denzel Washington. He plays the detective, him and Denzel. Check that out.
I didn't see that. What is that?
I forgot the title of it. It was super good, though. It's got Denzel. It's going to be good, no matter what.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because Denzel made a bad
man.
movie ever, right? I mean,
Never.
I don't think so.
Never.
I checked. He didn't. Cool. Very cool. All right. I guess that's the whole thing. Our websites, williamlutz.com, newperspectivesmusic.com, guineapigtanks.com, squiretools.com, and isotunes.com/reclaimed audio. Contact us for those show topics, those suggestions, that feedback. We love hearing from you guys. And don't forget to send us your tips either through email or via voice note via email as well. Or you can hit us up on Twitter at Reclaimed Audio. Those iTunes reviews, if they're 5-star, we will read them out. And of course,
even if it's a week late.
Yeah, even if it's a week late. And patreon.com/reclaimed audio. Really is the best way to support the podcast. And before I sign off, I will say for $1 an episode, you get access to the pre-show, which is where we come up with the topics. It's actually really fun. It's very less structured than the actual podcast, so it's really cool. And for $10 an episode, you get your name read aloud with everybody else there at the top of the hour. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Be well.
Bye, everybody.
Be good.